Today we're going to be designing a winter centerpiece, and the interesting thing about today's centerpiece is that it's not going to be holiday specific or Christmas oriented, which means your customers will be able to get a longer use out of this, and it also means that you as a designer, if you don't sell this centerpiece by Christmas time, you could always sell it a couple months after just as a plain winter design, and people will still be picking them up from you. The interesting fact that I have found over the last couple of years of selling centerpieces or arrangements is people will always wait till the last season to purchase these, last minute of the season to purchase these right before the holiday. For some reason it goes right over people's heads, and they are looking now up until 2 or 3 days before Christmas for the perfect centerpiece. They've already purchased most of their wreaths, they've already purchased most of their ornaments and decorations in that sense, but their centerpieces, they always usually wait to the last minute. So this is the perfect time to be creating them and advertising them. But what's also unique about this is that if your customer wants to decorate it for Valentine's Day, you can use some cross-selling techniques and sell them little bows or little decorations that they could apply for Valentine's Day. So not only do you make the initial sale of the winter design, the winter centerpiece, you could also add an option to purchase extra items such as little Valentine's Day bows or little hearts and stuff like that. So we're going to be using very plain colors today. We're not going to be adding anything too bold that would only match certain houses. So the colors we're going to be using today are very neutral and will be perfect in any home. And we're also going to be adding candles. So in years past, my best seller for Christmas time was always my fresh candle centerpiece. People go crazy for them. A lot of people don't decorate, but they always like to have a nice centerpiece for their home when guests come or even just for the holidays. So they usually purchase at least this. Keep in mind, you do not want to light the candles and you do not want to advertise the candles are lit. So if you do have an Etsy listing, once you create this, always add in the description that the candles are for decorative purposes only. There's no way you should be lighting these candles. It's not safe and it's not recommended. So you could also purchase little tags, what I've purchased for my fresh centerpieces, that say do not light candles, they're for decorative purpose only. So I encourage you guys to do that, whether it's locally or online, to disclose that the candles are not to be lit. So we're using a basic liner today. These in the floral industry are known as utility trays or liners. Typically liners are the plastic that go in the metal tin containers. The nice thing about these is that they're extremely inexpensive and extremely easy to find. This was picked up at Jacobson Floral for the purpose of fresh floral arrangements. However, you can pick up a cookie tray from Dollar Tree or Walmart for about 99 cents. Just make sure it's plastic and not ceramic or glass or anything like that. We're also going to be using dry floral foam. Make sure it is dry because we are only using dry floral products today. But when I am creating my fresh centerpieces, which I will show you at a later point, I use little anchor pins, or sometimes the trays, the utility trays that I purchase have little anchors in them, which essentially is just a little pick. Think of like a frog that you put for fresh flowers, and you put a little floral putty under it or adhesive and use that to stabilize your fresh floral foam. But again, we are designing with artificial, so if we apply a generous amount of hot glue and just secure it, there's no way this is going to go anywhere. It's all lightweight. You could even take it upside down and it'll be perfectly fine. But if you want to take an extra step and use some cold glue or something a little bit stronger than hot glue, by all means you certainly can do so. But we're not going to be adding any poinsettias or anything too holiday specific to today's design. But let's get started. Let's add some hot glue to the foam and attach it directly to our utility tray. So like I said before, we're not going to take the extra step and secure it using any of the fresh floral pins, the anchors that go on the bottom, or even using any cold glue. This centerpiece will be for my own home, so I'm not going to need to take the extra step. But if you do not feel secure just using hot glue, by all means you could anchor it somehow else. But we're going to be applying a generous amount of hot glue. Keep in mind these trays come in all sorts of colors, so if you're trying to match it, you can use whatever color you need. They carry them in so many different colors. I typically purchase them in black or white, or even like a hunter green, because those match anything I'm working with. So we're going to apply a generous amount, and then we're going to place it directly in the middle. Just like that. And we'll let that dry for a minute or two. We're going to be using this foliage. This is kind of like a white pine that's covered in flocking material and glitter. It's very, very pretty, and we're going to be using this to fill in our base. So I have purchased two, but we will see where one gets us. We also are going to be incorporating different types of greenery and different materials. So that's what I'm going to do throughout the entire bush. Just cut little stems off like that as long as possible. If we need to add some pins to it, using our steel pick machine, we can to elongate the stems a little bit. But this came from Hobby Lobby. It was $9.99, and the item number for this is 5803135. So I'm going to go throughout and cut down one entire spray, and then we'll place that throughout the design, and then we're going to accent it with some other greenery. So our next step is to incorporate our candles. Reason being is that once we start adding our greenery, the stems will begin poking towards the central portion of the foam, which will make it a lot harder to insert our candles. So these candles were picked up at a local dollar store. Not necessarily Dollar Tree, but just a dollar store. Dollar Tree carries candles as well. So I have 3 of them. These are known as tapered candles. These ones are, I believe, they're 10-inch ones. And then we also have the 12-inch candles as well. So these come in a pack of 2, the 12-inch, and then the 10-inch come in a pack of 3 for $1 each. So you get $1 for 3 candles, which is an extremely good deal. But keep in mind, if you're trying to create a very expensive centerpiece, even though we're not lighting these candles, the more expensive typically means the better quality and the better they look. And typically they are packaged individually, covered in like a saran wrap plastic, and labeled separately. So those are your best quality ones. But for today's design, these ones are perfect. We're not incorporating any material that's too expensive. So we have some of the 12-inch, and we also have some of the 10-inch. So we can add as many candles as we'd like. And we're just going to place them directly into the foam by poking them in. So we have 2 like that. We can come back in with a 3rd if we'd like. We can add as many candles as we'd like. So we'll place 3, just like that. I have cut down all of the greenery, and for the shorter pieces I added a steel pick. Keep in mind, steel pick machines are not a necessity. What you can do is always purchase floral tape for fresh flowers. That is how I make my boutonnieres. You could purchase that and just use a scrap stem and anchor it in and just tape around it. And that is how you can kind of get them a little bit longer. But since I have my steel pick machine, I might as well put it to some use. So I broke down one of the bushes, and then we'll begin placing some of them. Since we don't have too much of this greenery, we're going to try to distribute it as even as possible. And often you see designers place one piece on one end and then another piece on the other end to make sure it's even. You don't have to do that. For this situation, I'm not going to do it just to show you guys that you don't have to do it. So I'm kind of just adding them at random. Just so it's evenly dispersed. The only thing we're going to have that, you know, for the structure of this is that we are going to have it more horizontal than vertical, or more long than wide. Reason being, it is going to be a centerpiece for a table, so tables are often a lot longer than they are wide. So just keep that in mind when you're adding stuff. You don't want to make it a perfect circle, especially if you have a rectangular table. If you have a circle table, that's perfectly fine. But the majority of people do have long rectangular tables, and if you are selling this, you do want to make sure to create that to get as many purchases as possible. So just adding these at random. So that's what it looks like with one spray. We also have 4 pine cones that we're going to add. And we could add these in now, or we could wait till we have more greenery. They're not going to be our focal point, so we don't have to worry about adding them at this stage. You know, if we hide them a little bit, if anything, that's better, in my opinion, because these aren't going to be our main attraction. But for the pine cones, you never really want them to extend any further than the greenery. I like to actually keep mine a little closer towards the central portion of the design than too far out. It just kind of looks a little awkward. So I like to keep these a little bit closer. And also notice that they're not perfectly in each corner. That's perfectly fine. Don't worry too much about it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to incorporate a different greenery. We're going to begin placing some of this. So we have our winter greenery, which is the pine. And then we also have this greenery that we use year round. This came from Hobby Lobby, and the item number for this is 1392000. It was $6.99, 50% off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go throughout and cut each stem individually. I'm going to try to cut it as close to the base as possible. That way we don't have to add any steel picks. And we're going to begin adding it. So I've broken down one bush of them. And what we're going to do is we're going to add hot glue to the ends, like we have been doing with the pine, and begin placing them into the design. Again, no pattern, just trying to balance them out, evenly distribute. We're not using 2 of them. If we were using 2 of them, what we could do is we can make it a little bit thicker. But to keep our costs down, we will be using 1 of them and then adding different types of greenery and textures. So this is what we have so far. Notice that the color green on this is very similar to this. It's a little bit brighter, but it still has that velvety touch to it. This is, I believe this was listed as mint, whereas it looks more like a lamb's ear to me. But it has that soft texture that a Dusty Miller or a lamb's ear would have. So what we're going to add next is a different type of greenery. Now we'll be placing in one of my favorite textures, which is this juniper that we picked up from Hobby Lobby. It was $4.99, 50% off, and the item number for this is 5080163. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to break it down into smaller pieces. Each section can be broken down 2 or 3 times. We are going to place these throughout. So even some pieces that have a singular set of leaf like this is perfect. Just make sure you remove the tags. So again, just break it down to smaller segments, just like this. Okay, our final little section. And then we'll begin adding some of these. So what a lot of my customers that are local do is they purchase 3 of these, and often they have 6 or 8 foot tables, and they kind of use this instead of a table runner. So instead of the cloth, what they do is they place 3 of these going down the table, which is absolutely stunning. But what you could also do is create a larger one and just have it running down the table. but that would obviously be custom. I would not just be creating that just to sell. So as you can see, by taking a few of these pieces, it's filling it in nicely. And now you can see why we kind of push those pine cones in a little bit closer. That way they're not protruding too much. So this is what we have so far. What we're going to do now is we're going to break into another one of the greeneries that we have, whether it be the white pine, the mint or lamb's ear, or the juniper. We need one more of those greeneries to fill in a little bit more, and I'd rather use one of those 3 greeneries than add another greenery. Once you have 2 or 3 greeneries, it definitely changes the look and feel of your design. We have some of the stockier greenery, we have some of the finer greenery as you see in the juniper, and some that is a little bit different, which is the white pine. But we don't want to stray too far from that. We don't want to add 100 different textures. So we'll pick one of the 3. You could choose which one you have available to you, or the cheapest one, and begin filling it in. We're going to be adding a little bit more of this. This is something you can pick up year-round. This was the second greenery we added. So it's labeled as mint, but it looks more like lamb's ear to me, just a lot finer. So I'll break down one more of these. And some of them that are going up here, you can cut a little bit short and pull the greenery up a little bit. That way they're not quite so long. Because now what we're trying to do is fill in as much as possible. We don't have to be too concerned about seeing every little square inch of foam, not seeing every little square inch of foam, because we are going to come back in with some embellishments. So it's up to you which greenery you'd like to add as the last greenery. I personally wouldn't be adding any of the pine because it's more seasonal than the other greenery. The juniper you can get away with multi-seasons out of, but by adding more of this lamb's ear, you can use it longer in the season. So like I said, this design is going to be a winter design. But if we're using more lamb's ear, you could actually label it as a spring design. If this doesn't sell in winter, what you could always do is add a little bird's nest, some tulips, some daffodils to make it spring. You know, take out the pine cones if you want, add a different type of greenery. So there's a lot of wiggle room for this design. But what we're going to add next is some embellishments. We're going to add some picks and some little decorations. But as you can see, just by adding that additional greenery, it filled it in a lot more, and now it's starting to take shape. So this is every designer's favorite part. This is where your designer's flair gets to show, and you could be adding whatever you'd like. Lately, I've been really enjoying these natural botanicals. So here we have essentially potpourri on a stick that we picked up from Hobby Lobby. They carry these year-long, and they go 50% off every other week. These are in the wedding aisle, but these were $6.99. You get 5 of them, they go 50% off, so this was $3.50 for 5 of them. And as you can see, they come on very nice long sticks. The stick length is 15.748 inches, so about 16 inches or so. So we have these, and then we also have grapevine balls covered in kind of a fleece material. These are very pretty as well. These were $7.99. 50% off, and the item number for this one, the 3 of these, is 1627561, and then for the one of 5, the item number is 1089200. So for obvious reasons, we're not going to need the entire length, so we're going to cut these down a little bit. We can be adding as many as we'd like. The only thing about these is I like to keep them nice and tight in the centerpiece. I don't like them to be shooting out too far. So we're cutting the stems about 4 or 5 inches. So we'll put one in the middle between the candles, and then we'll come back in on either side and place a second one. Just like that, so we kind of have a triangular effect. And then we'll come back in on the opposing side. Keep in mind, this is a centerpiece, so you're going to be able to view this all the way around. So you want to make sure it's as pretty as possible all around it. So we have those 4 in place. Just like that. I think I'm going to hold off on using these. These are a little large for the design today. But what we can add now is some berries, some flowers, some other picks and decorations. Now we're going to be incorporating some ribbon into today's design, and we're going to be using this ivory cream colored velvet. This is 1.5 inch wired velvet, and I absolutely love working with wired velvet. It's one of the strongest ribbon I have found, and it holds its shape amazingly. So this came from Craft Outlet. They carry all sorts of colors. They have burgundy, they have like a cherry red that's traditional, they have white, they have blue, I'm pretty sure they have purple. But this is a 10-yard spool. It's about, I'd say about $3, maybe a little less, which is an extremely good deal. And the item number is RL1942C2. And we're not going to be creating a traditional bow for today. Traditionally, when I think of a red velvet bow, or velvet bow for that matter, I think of Christmas and only Christmas. And for centerpieces like this, when I create them using fresh material for Christmas, I do create 2 velvet bows on either side, because it's fresh. It's a fresh centerpiece and it does look beautiful. But for today's purpose, since we are going for a winter design, we're using ivory and we're not creating traditional bows. What I have here is about a 12 to 14 inch piece of ribbon, and what we're going to do is we're going to fold it approximately in half, fold it in half again, and kind of crumple it up on the back like that. And now what we can do is we can apply a steel pick. Just like that. So instead of using tape or wire or anything like that, we're just using our steel pick and making it very easy. Now what I'm going to do is, instead of dovetail, is we're just going to cut at an angle. We're keeping this as traditional and as plain as possible. And by dovetailing it, it kind of makes your ribbon more noticeable. Whereas we just want the ribbon to accent it. So throughout the entire cluster of ribbons, which we have about 6, we're just going to cut at an angle. Just like that. And like I said before, the wired velvet holds its shape nicely, so you can maneuver it and shape it any way you'd like. But now what we're going to do is we're going to come back into our arrangement and begin placing some of them. So this will give us a little impact, it'll give us a little ribbon, a little bit of color, whereas not making it so drastic that it's in our face and it screams Christmas. So whenever you come across a design where you want to incorporate something else, but don't want to add picks or a traditional bow, this is perfect for that. So we're just coming around and placing several of them. They don't have to be perfect, we're just peppering them in. I place one on this side and place one on the opposite side. So this is what it looks like. We've used 5 of them. It does have to be eye-appealing on both sides, but it doesn't have to be symmetrical. For a design like this, I kind of prefer it to be a little offset, things being not so perfect. For my fresh designs, I do make sure I put everything on opposing sides equally. Or what you could also do is mirrored image. So if we place an ornament on this side and we only have 2, instead of placing it on this side, you could place it on the opposing side. So think of it as kind of like the wreaths that we've done in the past, where we create 2 islands on an oval wreath, and we kind of mirror every item that we add. Okay, so at this point we could add more. We could add some more decorations, we could add some different flowers. What we're going to be incorporating now are some hydrangeas. We're using ultra white hydrangeas, but the nice thing about it is that in their entirety, you can kind of see that ivory in the center, which is extremely realistic, but that's the color we're going for this arrangement. So by pulling them apart, all we have to do is just pull them separate like that. By pulling them apart, it kind of showcases that ivory or cream color a little bit more, and that way we don't have too large of flowers in the design. So we're going to take these apart, we're going to add a steel pick, and then we're going to pepper them in, and we're going to keep these rather close to the center of the design. So instead of placing it directly on top, once we have our steel pick in, we're going to be able to come in nice and close. So we're going to go throughout and use our steel pick machine and steel pick one of our hydrangeas. So we've broken down our hydrangea into smaller clusters. We just pulled them right off. So one of them broke, so we have a little cluster like this. I think this size is even more fitting. I love the smaller ones. We don't want to add anything too bulky, which is why we held off on adding the larger ornaments or grapevine spheres covered in that cotton substance. So now we're going to pepper some of these in. So I've said in the past, instead of using moss, if you have to hide your foam in any centerpiece, by using filler flowers like this, break them down, you're able to hide the base. And it's also a little bit fancier. You know, some people enjoy the look of this, and if you're transporting them by shipping them, you'll definitely want to use flowers over moss, just so when your customer opens the box, they're not bombarded with a bunch of pieces of moss. So just keep that in mind. And here's a little one that broke off. We'll just tuck that underneath. Just like that. So at this point, if you want to add any glitter or any sparkle, you certainly can. But like I said, it doesn't have to be exact. If you want to go the mirrored image approach, you can do so. Or you could even have a completely different scheme on the other side. Just make sure it's balanced. So if you have like 10 ornaments on this side, don't go putting 2 on the other. Just for weight reasons, it doesn't look appropriate. But now's the point where we can fill in a little bit more. So as you can see under here, we have a little bare spot. So what we can do is we can take some of our scrap greenery, and we have some of this. So if you purchased the materials from a few projects ago, we use this in, I believe, the reindeer wreath as well as 2 other wreaths. I'm pretty sure we used this in 3 wreaths, but it's very inexpensive. It was $10, 50% off, and it came from Michaels, and the item number for this is 560908. Right now, it may be even more so on sale, but I also like using this because it kind of has that ivory tone to it. The little white balls aren't perfectly white, so we're just breaking it down to smaller pieces. So if you have any other scrap greenery, I wouldn't do anything too dark, nothing too hunter green, but if you have any scrap greenery like this that we've used in other projects, by all means use it up. If you are shipping this, make sure that you remove the candles. You could put them in the box in the original container, but I'd make sure I'd add some styrofoam around it or some bubble wrap to make sure it's not gonna break. So now we're coming up underneath. And we still have several pieces left over that we didn't cut. So if you wanted to save that for another project, you certainly can. So we got a lot of cover by using this specific greenery in different projects that have completely different. So we have a couple more pieces that we can place in. And there we go. So now you can see why it was easier to attach the candles before we added any of our greenery. That way all of the stems inside weren't gonna interfere with it. But this is how it turned out. Very simple, very cost-effective, and very elegant. You could add more if you'd like. You can keep it simple like this. But just keep in mind that something like this can apply throughout the entire winter season. So it's nice to have some seasonal, holiday-specific designs like a poinsettia centerpiece or my fresh centerpieces. But it's always nice to have some of these in your shop because, you know, you could use it for several different holidays. This is beautiful for New Year's. You can incorporate some gold to make it New Year's themed or have some little fireworks or something. For Valentine's Day, same exact thing. You could have some roses. Even Mardi Gras, you could turn this into a Mardi Gras centerpiece by having the golds, the purples. This is just a great base to start with. But I hope you guys learned something new. We will be teaching more videos this week. We'll have several more available, including a couple fresh designs showing you guys how I create my fresh centerpieces, which are a little bit different than this. But I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye, everybody.